Hey everyone, thanks for joining us for KPIs that matter. We're talking about something every business owner has wrestled with, which numbers actually matter. We can measure everything these days, and if you're tracking 42 metrics, it's a lot to track, a lot to be overwhelmed with. So we're going to talk about which ones actually matter, the handful of ones that are worth your time, and how to keep them front and center in your business. So let's introduce our panelists today. First, we have Jim Skinner. Jim is the president of ANC Pest Management in New York. He's been running his family business for about 35 years, right, Jim?
Yep.
He's seen it all, old school clipboards, tons of spreadsheets. Jim loves his spreadsheets, right? We know that well. Lots of different dashboards. He's great at figuring out which numbers actually move the business forward. We talk with Jim about this on a regular basis. Next, we have Dan Gordon. Many of you probably know and love Dan. He's the owner of PCO Bookkeepers and Turf Books, and is a CPA who's worked with hundreds of pest control and lawn care businesses across the country. And he's definitely the guy you want in your corner when you're trying to make sense of all the financial side of your KPIs. So we're happy to have Dan join us today. And last, but certainly not least, we have Trent McKenzie. Trent owns Vertex Pest Control out of Idaho, and he's built a high-performance team with a very people-first approach. And we've had the ability to see Trent's business grow over the years. He's really passionate about tracking KPIs that aren't just around dollars and cents, but more about team morale and service quality, safety, things like that. So, welcome, fellas. Thank you for joining.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. So glad to have you. So here's how things are going to go today. We're going to talk about the most important KPIs for 2026, how to avoid drowning in data, and how to turn your numbers sort of into action. We can track all day long, but if we're not actually turning it into action, what does it really matter? So we'll finish with a quick lightning round at the end if we get to it. So let's kick things off. Let's talk about the KPIs that really matter. Jim, I'm going to start with you. If you could only track 3 to 5 KPIs in your business, what are they? What are they going to be?
Yeah. So years ago, I had no clue what to track, right? In fact, I can remember being in a Pat Quigley sales seminar, and Pat pointed his finger at me and said, "Jim, what's your cost per sale?" And I gave him a number, and the worst thing that could possibly ever happen was he called me out on the number. He said, "Where'd you get that number?" I said, "Well, I kind of made it up," which started me to think like, hey, maybe I really should figure it out, and maybe I should talk to somebody to help figure it out. And fortunately, years ago, I had joined Don and Dan's peer group before it was called PMP. But yeah, and they were explaining how to break it out as far as, breaking out the cost per lead, cost per sale, things around that. So, I mean, from there, I've built out some dashboards, as you had mentioned before. Some of the things that are most important to me would be, the cost per lead, which turns into your cost per sale, right? How many you're losing, right? So my first budget I ever built, man, I was growing incredibly fast. But what I didn't realize was I wasn't hitting my budget because I didn't put any attrition. So in my new spreadsheets, I have attrition built in. And they say if it's not measured, it's not monitored, right? And I've heard that from Dan. So with that being said, we really want to grow our reoccurring revenue. So tracking reoccurring revenue is extremely important. And then after that would be our callback ratio. And then after that would be the utilization rate, right? To make ourselves more profitable per hour.
Gotcha. Okay, so you've really hit the big components of, sales and service all in one with those top level metrics, which is great. So, it seems like you got a lot of insight from Dan.
Yeah.
How about you, Dan? What's on your must watch list for 2026?
Jim stole all my thunder. So basically what you got to think about, okay, when I look at a business, how do I know whether I'm winning at the game of business? And you could say, well, am I making the most money, or is the company worth the most? And more likely than not, it's what the company's worth, because you can dial up marketing or dial it back, or dial up certain things and dial them back and play with your profitability. But over time, what is the value of your company? And so the value of your company has to do with that. Well, there's several metrics. There's financial, operational, and marketing. But the financial, just from high level, what's your recurring versus non-recurring? Okay, what is your dollars per hour that you want to get, and how efficient are your routes? So you could get $500 an hour, but only be 20% efficient and only return $100. So that's not a profitable account. Or you could have $100 account that you're there all day and your route efficiency is 100%, and that's just as good or just as bad as the other one. So you're looking at route efficiency. And then below that, I like to look at sales and marketing as two separate disciplines, because one could be broken and one could work just great, but you don't know. You don't know which one unless you're breaking them apart. So your marketing is everything that you do to bring a lead in, and that's how much you spend on Coalmarch and Google and all these things, right? And then you divide it by the number of leads, and that's your cost per lead, right? And then your sales is everything that you do to convert that lead into a sale. So, that's your salesperson, that's the follow up and whatnot. But you could have a really great marketing program and bring in 100 leads and close at 25%. And so that means your sales are broken, not your marketing. Or you bring in 25 leads and you sell them all. Well, that means your marketing's broken and your sales is good. So you've got to separate the two of them. So I like to do that. And then last but not least is just kind of all the way down at the bottom. I like free cash flow to owner. How much are you making? I call it free cash flow. Some people call it EBITDA. Some people call it adjusted EBITDA. EBITDA stands for earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, but it's basically cash flow to ownership. And so I like to look at that, because at the end of the day, if I'm making, if I have a company that does $1 million and we put 100,000 of EBITDA, that's 10%, right? So what are best in class companies providing to ownership? Probably 20 to 25%. But that, if you're below that, then you're not maximizing the value of your company. And you can fix that in a number of different ways using those other KPIs.
Absolutely makes sense. And you mentioned, sort of three categories: the financial, the operational, the marketing focuses. Trent, you have a big focus on team culture, and, the metrics for those can be a little bit different. Sort of which KPIs tell you, that your crew is sort of firing on all cylinders and doing what they need to do?
We have a big focus on people, because I don't understand the numbers like Dan does, which it's easier for me to focus on people this way.
Yeah.
Well, if you focus on the people, it automatically, the numbers.
Yeah.
It does. It helps. It helps.
Yeah.
There are two kind of key things that we do. One, it's not a metric that we track, because it's something that it's just an expectation that's going to get done every single week. And that's every team member at Vertex has a one-to-one with their direct lead, where we can kind of check in and see how they're doing. And so it gives them a chance. There's not a set agenda. It's literally just a check-in: what's working, what's not working. We've had some really, really great conversations where it's like, well, I'm struggling because my dad's going through cancer treatments and it's not going well. So it can be really, really personal, or it can be like, hey, I'm nervous, I'm not going to hit my close rate goal this week. How can you help me get my numbers back on track, because I haven't been doing a great job closing sales? So that's one that's a metric that we're watching is did everyone have their weekly report, their chance to meet with their leader to check in and see how they're doing? It gives us a chance to make little course corrections throughout the week. But as far as like an actual metric, I think attendance is a really, really big one. As far as, is the team firing on all cylinders? I think the first step is showing up. And if you're passionate about what you do and you love what you do, you're going to be a little more willing to work through the hard days when maybe you're not feeling 100%, or you've got some personal things going on. And so I think attendance is a really good indicator and kind of a precursor to a lot of other issues. If you have someone with attendance issues, eventually there's going to be additional problems, performance, call outs, things like that. So attendance is actually a very basic number, but we watch it closely and ensure that people are showing up and hopefully showing up with a positive attitude as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's one that I feel like is very simple, but if you're not actually tracking it and seeing the trends, you can sort of lose sight of what
Yeah.
truly is a problem over the course of 6 months, a year. Oh, XYZ didn't, hit those goals. So it makes sense. Definitely a lot of different data pieces to track. We measure a million things. And like I said, it can get really overwhelming. So let's move into avoiding data overload. Dan, I can only imagine that having sort of easy to scan and understand reports is really crucial for the businesses that you work with. How do you help your clients' businesses, cut it down to just the essentials?
So you're absolutely right. Too many KPIs is too much to keep track of, and a lot of them will conflict with each other and whatnot. And so you kind of say, "Geez, well, what should I do?"
Mhm.
So Trent brought up something really terrific in that if you watch your people and you do and have them do what they're supposed to do and train them up, then the numbers will take care of themselves. So how do you look at these numbers? Well, if you look at a profit and loss statement, it's divided, or the ones that we do are divided into three areas. The first one is revenue, and that's your commercial, residential, wood destroying, and within that, recurring and non-recurring. The second is your direct cost, or your cost of goods sold. That's what it costs to produce pest control. So if you were in a product-based business, you'd be selling a product. Well, we sell a product, and that product is hours of pest control. And what goes into the raw materials of that is your labor, your technician labor, your materials, your vehicle costs, and associated things, everything that goes along with the technician. So you've got your revenue. That's kind of that's the sales, or what drives it. You've got the direct costs. That's how efficient you produce your product or service at. And then below that, you've got sales, marketing, and general and administrative. And that shows how well your office is doing. So the sales metrics, you can judge your marketing people, your sales people, but also, below that, you can judge how well is your office doing, how is your CSR doing, what are the costs there. So I like to look at financial statement metrics, but also that route efficiency. That's extremely important. That's something. So we work in a lot of mergers and acquisitions, right? So it's pretty easy when you buy a company to correct a routing problem. It's not easy to correct a pricing problem. In other words, if the prices are too low, I go and buy your company, and then I go to all your customers. Listen, I'm doubling your price. That's not going to go well. But if I can take those stops and sprinkle them into stops that I have that are, good, profitable customers, it bolsters everything. And so those are some of the things that we look at. But yeah, you're right. Keeping it to a minimum is paramount.
So keeping it to a minimum and then actually having your leaders really represent those metrics and follow through on them and actually have buy-in. How do you make sure that your leaders genuinely care about the numbers that you care about?
Yeah, I think there's two steps. I think the first one, I think as business owners and as business managers, we sometimes think we have all the answers. And so we just go gung ho and set everything and tell everyone this is what we're going to do. I think a better approach is involving them in the process. And these people, especially your managers, but even frontline staff, technicians, they should know what numbers really matter. And so involving them at whatever capacity you can in setting what those numbers are is kind of a time investment, because you can spend less time explaining why it's important because they're in the process. And so they're more involved and bought in because they participated in setting what the numbers were. So I think that's the first step whenever possible. And I think it's more possible than we recognize, is involve the team when you set numbers. The second one is really only important if you can't involve the team, or maybe you can't involve them as much as you'd like to for whatever reason, is really explaining the why. I think Dan talked about business is just a game, and people are competitive and they want to win. And so showing them how whatever number it is you're tracking contributes to winning the game, they'll be motivated and they'll want to know, okay, how can I contribute? What can I do to influence this number, regardless what it is? Maybe it's completion rate, maybe it's reservice rate, even profitability. Obviously, everyone in the company influences that number. So I think showing them and kind of really, really clearly outlining, hey, if we do this daily, we're going to have this impact. And they can see, oh, this is how I can contribute to actually, everyone wants to be on a winning team. I think more importantly, everyone wants to contribute to being on a winning team. And if you educate them that way, they'll be bought in naturally because they're going to want to win.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know, sort of to echo that, Jim, I know you've always done a really good job of sharing your dashboards, your KPIs with your vendors, us, Coalmarch, and I assume with your team as well, and making sure that it's simple and easy to follow. I mean, it's always been a great resource for us to know exactly what's going on in your business, and that visibility is invaluable. So how do you keep it simple and avoid overcomplicating it for your team or vendors or whoever you're sharing with?
Yeah. So for me, I think it's, to Trent's point, keeping everybody involved in like building that dashboard and saying, look, is this achievable? I mean, unfortunately we have years past data that we can go up against to say, hey, by the way, this is achievable. And by the way, this is what we're doing. Each year we're going up a little bit, initially, I wanted us to be here, and that wasn't practical for us to make that big jump. But we actually moved the needle little by little, and we have some historical data to go with it. So if we have somebody who's new, who's questioning whether or not we can actually do it, we can actually go back and go, hey, this is what we've done in the past, and this is where we see ourselves in the future. Can you see yourself there? Just so, teach them, coach them up, a little bit more buy-in. But yeah, when it comes to the dashboards and even the budgets, and the P&L, it's not something I hide from my people. I kind of bring them in, talk to them one-on-one, and break it out for them so that they can understand it. And then ask them questions, because a lot of times you get their head bob of like, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm on board. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, do you understand it? No. No, I don't. So asking them questions back to make sure that they actually do understand what you're talking about was extremely helpful.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that is a perfect segue into sort of our next part about turning KPIs into actual action and what comes with sharing that information with the team so that we can see actionable insights and plans for the future of how to improve things. So Trent, going back to you, how do you take what the numbers are saying and turn it into training or process changes or even just morale boosts?
I think it relates to question number 2. I think, again, if they're really bought in and they were involved in the process and they're on board, I think it becomes much, much easier, because if you showed them the numbers and you showed them how those numbers contribute to winning, they're going to know, like, hey, are we winning or are we losing? I'm a big sports guy, and I'm coaching my son's flag football team. And it's 2 different teams. There's second and third graders, and then there's a team that's fifth and sixth graders. And these kids are hilarious because the number one thing they're watching is the scoreboard. Like, more so than actually watching the game. I have to be like, hey, just focus on the game. Like, let's do our part. We'll deal with the score later. And they get upset because they use like the old flip scores, right? The old flip charts that you can flip through, and the wind inevitably blows, and so it changes the score, and they have like a panic attack that the score is inaccurate. And I think as adults we're very, very similar. Like, we want to know what the score is. We want to know how we're doing, regardless of how competitive we are. We want to know if we're performing well. And so I think when there's buy-in and we know what winning looks like, we want to know, are we winning the game or are we losing the game? And so I think the biggest thing for turning numbers into, whether it's coaching or morale boost, is just showing the team what the numbers are and updating them. And so we have a monthly meeting. We call it our spotlight meeting. We go through a lot of our key numbers. We just show them, this is how we did last month. Here's where we're at for sales versus what our goal was. Here's what our close rate looked like. Here's a few of our top sales guys. Here's what our reservice rate was. And the coaching happens naturally because people will wonder, like, well, our reservice rate was really high. What are we going to do differently this month so that we're not missing it back-to-back months and going to be off track for our annual goal? And so I think the coaching happens naturally, and the process change that you mentioned in the question, if they're really bought in and they understand how their number impacts the team winning or losing the game.
Mhm. Yeah, makes perfect sense. And we love to gamify. Everything's about gamifying, whether it comes to sports or, tracking your steps or whatever it may be. It's all about the game. So Jim, tell us about a time when maybe something that you have tracked consistently sort of jumped out at you and really made you change something big from an operational perspective, and sort of put things into action.
Yeah. So one of the things we were doing, we started tracking our callback ratios, right? So in the beginning, when I started doing my scoreboard, right, keeping everything in one place, I wasn't tracking that. Then I started tracking our callback ratios, and our callback ratios were tremendously high. And we sat there and said, okay, now what? What are we going to do about it? And you know what? We changed our treatment practices. And over the course of this year, we changed our treatment. We noticed it last year, and we changed our treatment practices, which actually cut our callback ratio in less than half. Which saved us on a lot of services, over 1,800 services we saved on callback ratios. So it wound up being a lot, and was a great impact for us. And you know what? When you have less callbacks, you have happier customers, better retention. So yeah, it worked out good for us.
Yeah, definitely impacts every part of the business. And, Dan, I'm sure you're no stranger to watching financial metrics and KPIs maybe go south in certain ways, just like Jim was saying. What's the first thing that you look at when you see something trending in the wrong direction?
So a company that's sick most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, will have one of three things or several of these items. It's labor, marketing, and materials. Those are the three things that make up the bulk of your P&L. And it's tech labor, it's sales labor, it's office labor. And then marketing, as you know, could be the greatest thing in the world, but it can also just, really run away. And when your cost per lead and then your closing percentage is not that good. And you being in the lawn care industry a while back, when they were still doing, or some people still do, the direct mail, you're looking for these $150 cost per leads, and they're coming in at $1,000 because your program's not working. Well, that's a huge problem. And also what I've seen is the companies that aren't ready for a good marketing program, right? That Rachel, you and Colmarch can make the phone ring all day or get all of the form fills. But if the calls are getting abandoned because you're overwhelming the office people, or they just aren't trained on how to sell, that can be a problem. So, but if you want to grow a company quickly, you got to put money in marketing. You got to be scientific about it, though. You got to understand, well, okay, I'm going to take money out of my operating income to put it into marketing. Don't just throw it at marketing. And then you've got to look at your routing. Is the routing effective? Is the pricing effective? So, just because your labor is too high doesn't mean your guys are getting paid too much. It might be the efficiency with which you use them,
Yeah. No, makes complete sense. So we're going to switch gears into our rapid fire round. Before we jump into this, though, I wanted to mention an upcoming session that we're having on October 30th. It's From Fragmented to Fluid, Building a Unified Holistic Marketing Strategy in 2026. This is where, we go beyond digital and look at our marketing strategy from that holistic perspective. So definitely recommend you join. But going back, quick lightning round, no long answers here. I just want to hear from each of you. Pick one KPI you'll never stop tracking. Trent, I'll go with you first.
Customer retention.
Customer retention. How about you, Jim?
Cost per sale.
Cost per sale. Dan?
Dollars per hour.
Dollars per hour. Oh, man, I want to dig into these, but we got to keep going. Lightning round. What about one KPI you think is totally overrated, Jim?
I struggle with that one. I'll pass. If I had to go, how many dollars you're making per mile? There you go.
Gotcha.
That's a
How
cool
about you?
one, actually.
Dan, what do you think?
Most balance sheet KPIs, because small businesses are not, their balance sheets aren't set up as, say, a public company or company that's
Mhm.
audited. So the owner might lend the company money, but is that really a loan or is that equity? So then you go, well, what's the debt to equity ratio? And that's often the single largest asset that you own as a company is not on your balance sheet. That's your customer list. So it makes most of the balance sheet KPIs kind of irrelevant for mom and pop businesses.
No, absolutely. And how about you, Trent?
This one Dan is going to love. Production per hour, I think, is overrated.
We should debate
Wait,
this.
do tell.
Okay, let's let you explain, Trent. We got the time.
I think for my business it is. I think it can hurt customer loyalty especially, I think it's important to look at. I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but I think it is overrated because we're more on spending time with customers, getting to know customers, building relationships with customers, less so than getting in and getting out. And I think when you focus on production, you can hurt that mindset because you can shade the technicians to think that it's about producing. And so the faster I can get in and get out while still doing a good job, because obviously reservice is going to hurt that production if you're doing free callbacks like most companies do. But I think for our culture that's very, very people first, production per hour is one that is just overrated for us. I still monitor it. I still look at it, but it'd be one that I would be okay with not watching closely.
There is, I mean, there's something to be said about your best guys doing the callbacks so that you make the customers happy. So their production isn't that good, but
Yeah.
you still need that. So I'm not totally in disagreement with you.
Awesome. Love to hear the debate a little bit. All right. I feel like I had this as our lightning round, but I honestly want to hear a little bit more. One favorite tool or method you use to track KPIs. Give us a little bit more insight into what you're doing for this, if you don't mind. Dan, we'll start with you.
It's no secret, we do accounting for hundreds of companies around the country, and we started using a program called Fathom. And Fathom is, you could use it yourself. It takes a little bit of setup. You kind of need to have a little bit of a tech background, which I clearly don't, but the people who work with me do. And what Fathom does is it allows us to take the information from the CRMs and from the QuickBooks and create reports by the push of a button. So I can break out certain things and look at them that way. It also allows us to compare you to the rest of our client base very quickly. We did a cost study, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, and that was good. And it took me probably 1,000 hours to do it. Well, we're doing another one for Pest World, and it's just a matter of pushing buttons and really getting it typeset. So it'll take 25, 30 hours. I think that's, some of the technology that's out there is just absolutely amazing.
Love it. I saw a couple head nods from you guys. Are you using Fathom? Familiar with it, Jim or
I'm
Trent?
not.
Little familiar with it. Yeah. Once again, I'm not the tech department. Yeah.
Jim, you're using it. You just don't know what it is. It's our delivery method now. That's really
100%. 100%.
Love it. So Jim, if you're not the tech guy, what are you using?
So I got to be honest with you. I'm not the tech guy, but I have a computer company that handles all of my computers and my phones, knows PestPack, and we're using Google Sheets. And the reason why I like it is that all the reports go into Google Sheets. So it's one place that everyone looks at, and they could look at all the KPIs to see what's going on. So Yeah. I mean, I sat down with him. I've spent, I can't tell you how many hundreds of hours building it. But we have all the algorithms built into it now, and it just speaks for itself, which is awesome.
I've seen it firsthand, so I can definitely, if it's visible to everyone, easy to use, and in one place, I mean, you're ticking all the boxes, so I don't see anything wrong with that. How about you, Trent?
We just have a weekly scorecard. There are a few other things that I look at, but as a team, we're looking at a weekly scorecard. Started in Excel. We operate on EOS, for those of you familiar with that. And so we use the 90 scorecard that the entire team gets to look at and see where our metrics are. And I think the tool matters. And I think Dan definitely attested to that, the amount of time that the Fathom has saved him. But I think the most important thing is that you just are consistent. Like, you've got to spend the time looking at it and sharing the data with the team. I think the tool matters, but more importantly, that you're using the tool consistently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
You can be wrong, but if you're consistent, you can draw conclusions, and that's good. That's fine, as long as you're consistent.
very, very true. I wanted to also give a shout out to one of our partners, Applause. They've just recently launched their team scorecards, and I've just been really impressed with what they've put together as far as tracking within app for technicians. I think we talked a lot about having that visibility across the team, and I think they do a great job of making that come to life. So if anyone is interested in looking more into Applause, would definitely recommend it. They've been a great partner. But awesome. This has been so helpful. I think really easy to understand where you guys are coming from, and all of the different things that matter to, insightful businesses like yours, successful businesses like yours. So thank you guys for joining us. We're very appreciative.
Thanks for having us.
Of course.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, have a great day.
Take care.